Anyway, should I just go on here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. He's talking about back in the day with the Citations that we traveled with a lot, and we had everything matched. That we all wore the same thing all the time. We had matched slacks, and we had those casual sweaters that we had. We had 3 of them. We each had a black one, a gold one, and a red one, and matched afterglow suits and casual outfits. We had everything, and it was all exactly alike. And in the early days of the quartet, I told him, I said, now look, one thing is that I don't miss Mass on Sunday. I said, we got to make a plan for me to get to Mass on Sunday, no matter what happened. Well, it was okay with them. And I always used to say that the other 3 guys, I was the only Catholic out of all 4 of them, and they didn't mind a bit. And it worked out so good most of the time, because if we were going north and west, I mean, we go to Chicago, we hit Chicago and had to change planes. And O'Hare had a chapel where you could have Mass on Sunday almost any time of the day you wanted. And then if we were going to the north and to the east, then we'd have to change at Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh also had one. So that was one way of doing it. Otherwise, we had to make other arrangements. So it's one time, the Butler's the guy that really tells this story. And it's one of the stories where you had to be there. But it was a horrendous weekend. Friday night in Newport News, Virginia. Saturday night in, it was a 2-nighter. One night in Newport News and one night at Norfolk. They were right together. And then that was on Friday night. And on Saturday night we were in Huntington, West Virginia. And was it Huntington? I don't know. It was someplace. And on Sunday morning, anyway, the whole weekend is all booked up. And we flew in, and on Sunday afternoon we had a show in Connersville, Indiana. And that's the way it was. And by the time we're really pretty much knocked out, with Friday night shows, Saturday afterglows on both of them, and no sleep or anything, get into Indianapolis, and they had a Mass set for me at a nearby church, and then we rented a car to drive on over to Connersville. And so that's the way it is. And we're in sweaters. We're dressed in black slacks and scarlet red sweaters. And so they stay out in the car. I go into church, and I'm standing in there, Well, a few minutes goes by, and here comes Bill Myers walking down the aisle. Bill, he was his father was a preacher, and Bill had a, kind of a religious background and everything. And I kind of like to see what goes on here, and so he gets in, and 2 guys dressed exactly alike had a couple of people looking around, And about the next thing that happened is that Butner decides to join us. Now, see, Mass had already started now, so here he comes walking down the aisle, so everybody giving him the eye. Here comes the 3rd guy in with, in the same kind of outfit. And to make the story short and everything, after later on, here comes Netherton. He's saying, well, but they're all by myself, and he comes in. So there's 4 of us. Well, you could hear, we were, what are they, a bowling team? Or we could hear the buzz going around all around us. And that's the one when, that's the way it happened. Now, the Butler had such a big kick out of the guy that the priest that had the Mass. He wasn't actually the celebrant of the Mass. He came out to talk at the homily. And his talk was about the big clothing drive that they were having, for the homeless and for the needy, and he was right out of Central Casting. I mean, like Friar Tuck, and he talked with the brogue, sure, and he's in there. He did the blankets and we this, that, and the other thing. And he comes up with something like, I got a little twinkle in his eye, and he says, and if you got a couple of bucks that you want. Well, he got that orange Butler's on the floor. He's laughing his head off. So it's just one of the things that you can go back and think about, you know. And we had a brand new Buick that we rented from someplace, and we were late getting to, you know, going to be cutting it fine, getting to Connersville. And Netherton was driving, and he's flying, man, I'm telling you. We went over railroad tracks and became airborne. When we hit the bottom, the whole bottom flies out of that thing. The muffler went off of it, everything went off of it. Oh my. But the way the guys were very tolerant of the knee bender in the crowd. They were very tolerant.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah. But to this day, you know, it's one of the things that I just don't miss math. You know.
Good for you. Good for you. Well, let's back up a little bit with the citations, and the single most probably, and you're the one to say that. But certainly to me, from a distance, the Vietnam experience that you all had must stand out as one of your great thrills with the citations, and as a barber shopper actually.
Well, the USO situation had been going on for several years. It had gone on to a certain extent even back during the Korean War, and where quartets would, you know, go over and entertain. Primarily, what they did was to go to the hospitals that were operated over there. The hospitals in Japan, Formosa, Okinawa, Hawaii. And they would sing at all those places over a 3-week period. They would sing at those small places. Usually it was for very small groups of people, you know, singing in wards and things like that. And they would be singing sometimes 7, 8, 9 performances in a day. You know, just go through a whole hospital singing in groups of 8 and 10 at a time. You know, and it became very popular. And we had been asked, the citation had been asked several times, you know, to make this tour, and there was always something, you know, we couldn't go, and until finally, this one time we got asked, and Bob Netherton said, "Well, we've got this invitation to go, and what can we do?" And Rosemary, I said, "Well, I'll check, you know, with the family." And I think Rosemary said, "Well, I know that Betty Joyce isn't going to let Bob Netherton go, and you know, and that Kenny will never get off from the telephone company." And so she said, "Well, it's okay, you know, it's okay with me." And it kind of took a round robin like that. Each one of the wives said there's some reason that somebody wasn't going to let anybody go, and so happened that the telephone company, as far as Buckner was concerned, they thought that was a great piece of business, you know, and they thought that was just great, and so he got off without any problem. And I don't know exactly how it worked with Bill, and of course Netherton, he was the kind that with the banks at the time, and he was the kind of guy, if he wanted to, he said, "No, I'll go." He said, "The way they let me off, fine. If they don't let me off, I'll still go." And so that's the way the acceptance came about. None of the wives really wanted us to go, but none of them wanted to be the one to refuse. And assuming that somebody else would pull the trigger, why they said, every one of them said it was okay. So that's the way that worked out. A little sidelight, when we got ready to leave, we had all kinds of parties. Fritzie Drybro, you know, the founder of the chapter, he threw a big thing for the 4 of us and our wives. Big private dinner at the 800 building down there where he lived, in the penthouse and all, really top drawer stuff. And then of course when we left out at Standiford Field, there would be 150 people out there, you know, all hollering and raising cane and hugging and every other kind of thing. And one of the little sidelights there, you know, it was time to get on the airplane, and we were running to get on the plane and grabbing people and hugging people. And this one lady was, you know, standing right there. I remember I gave a really big hug and a kiss on the cheek, and said, "We'll be seeing," you know, and everything. And she's fine, great, you know, and everything. She's right. Ended up, she sat across the aisle at me on the airplane. She says, she was just there, you know, and then And but she said it was really good. What what are you doing? We always told her what we were doing, and so we did. We made the trip, and it was by commercial airplane to San Francisco, Travis Air Force Base, and a charter plane on World Airways, which was a charter service flying, troops primarily, and it took a 707, made one stop in Anchorage, Alaska, and we were there for about an hour, and then a long jump to Yokota Air Force Base in Japan, and then from there on into Saigon. It was a total of about 30 hours, and we were pretty well knocked out when we got there, but we had to go through immigration and be photographed and fingerprinted and all the stuff that you do, and that night they asked us to do a show. We weren't supposed to start this thing, but that night they asked us to do a show in a service club at the Air Force Base, at Thompson Air Force Base, and we did this show there. And the only reason I say it is two things that happened. The first thing that happened is that we did this show in Thompson Air Force Base in Saigon, and right off the bat, I ran into the lady that was one of the Red Cross director there. Was a lady that her home was 2 blocks away from my home, on Eline Avenue in St. Matthews. And for a long time we corresponded afterwards and everything. But she was there as the director of the place, and that was the night that. Well, no, it wasn't either. It was the next night. But that was the beginning of the way thing up there. And then the next day, they took us into an army aviation. The Army flew King Air, Beech King Air airplanes, and they had them, but they were had web seating in them in the inside and everything, and they were called VIP flights, and the Army used them for dispatches and fly people and one thing or another. And the first place they took us was to Da Nang, and of course Da Nang was hotter than a firecracker at the time, and we were up there for 4 days and doing different things. And on the way up there, says we're green as grass, we don't know anything. On the way up there, Kenny Buckner says, look out the window. And it didn't have window, he had little portholes, and look out there, and they were flying over the mountains. And we weren't very high, we were flying 12,000 feet maybe. And you could see little puffs of smoke here and puff here and a few things over one thing or another like that. And we asked the pilot, what was it? And he said, well, it's the Navy. They're working on those mountainsides, and we're flying right over the top on our first dose of it. There was a war still going on. And the Navy they were just flying, just pasting these mountainsides like you wouldn't believe. And we're 12,000 feet flying right over top of it. And boy, they'd come in pairs, and And first what they were doing is they'd come in and drop their bombs or do whatever they were going to do and flip around, and didn't have very far to go right out there to their carrier, and they'd load up again and make another one, And so that was our first taste of the fact that there was still a war going on. We could just see it right there.
What year, Jim?
72.
72, okay.
Yeah. The war was supposed to be winding down at the time, but it really wasn't. I mean, there was still a bunch of it going on.
Sure.
And our people had mostly, what was left over, our people were mostly professionals, not so much the draftees anymore, but there were some, but not as much as the professional guys were. And you got to understand that we're green, we don't know anything about what's going on. So we landed Da Nang, and the pilot, he shut off one engine where you got off the airplane, left the other engine going, and we said, are you going to wait for us? And he said, oh, no. I said, I don't wait here. He says, as soon as you get off here, I'm out of here. Well, what do you mean? He said, well, look, this town is this place, Da Nang Air Base, or whatever. Well, I don't know whether it was. I guess it was Air Force. He says this is nicknamed Rocket City. He says they're throwing rockets in here all the time. And I said, well, he says if when they billet you, he said, try not to be around the runway, this main runway. He said, try to be as far away from it as you possibly can. And he says, if in your billet, try to be on the first floor. And he says, try to stay away from an outfit called the Gunfighters. And it's an Air Force squadron. And they had their nickname, and they called themselves the Gunfighters. And well, he said they are a particularly crazy bunch and a ferocious bunch, and they really get after these, after the bad guys. And he said they really try to get after them if they can. He says, okay, we get off the airplane, they put us on a van, and we go out down towards the end of the runway, and we make a turn, and we thought, well, we're going to get away from the runway here. Make a turn, come right back down the other side, and take us into a bunch of buildings, and we're going to be billeted. And we went through a gate where our billet was over here, right next door. And on the gate was up there, welcome to the Gunfighters.
Oh my goodness.
And they take us to the supply room. They give us an extra mattress, which you took, an extra mattress. There was one on the bed, but they gave you another one to put over yourself. And a steel helmet, and a flak vest, and a drawn assignment of where your bunker was. Man, I think my luck's done run out on this kind of stuff. And so that's what it was. We had to, and of course they put us on the second floor, and so then we had to go through a drill to show us where our bunkers were. With that out in the front yard of that thing, and put on a flak vest. Well, I put on that flak vest, and it came around about right here. I mean, I'm wide open right across. That's how far it came around, right there. Myers the same way. Buckner to a lesser extent. And so, when this thing started playing with Buckner and I never slept the whole time we were there. I mean, we sat up on it all night long. They threw one rocket in on the day we got there, and we heard it go off, but it must have been at least a half a mile away. We heard it go off. But we wondered why they didn't do more at the time. They said, well, the reason they don't do it, just constantly is because when they send up a rocket, that immediately their position is noted, and if they're not, when they send a rocket up, generally within 30 seconds, there's something that they take it right out. The helicopters are flying all the time, and they'll take it right out as soon as they find a location. So it wasn't a thing that you just run into all the time, but they did throw a couple of men out there while we were there. And at Da Nang, we could go nowhere without a whole squad. We just didn't get to go anyplace. And the first show we sang was with an advisory team. Our mission was to entertain advisory teams that were generally out into the boondocks. They couldn't get any other kind of entertainment too, because most of the entertainment was rock groups with big bunches of equipment and everything like us. And with us, we were four guys with a little cigar box amplifier and a couple of speakers and a microphone, and whole thing you could put almost in your back pocket, and that was it. And they could take us anywhere, and they did. I mean, we take us way out into the boonies. And this first night, we were to do one act right outside of Da Nang. And when we got there at middle of the afternoon, we found out that this group had been ambushed or had been surrounded or something just up at a place called Hue. That was H-U-E, Hue, up there, right up near the demilitarized zone. And in a situation, a place called the Citadel, and they were trapped in there, and the bad guys were coming over the walls. And they were, just about ready to be overrun. When the Air Force came in there without orders, came in there with these big Chinook helicopters, and they got this advisory team, got these guys out of there. That was just 24 hours prior to when we got there. And now each one of these outfits had their own little compound with a bar and a recreation room and a little stage, and this is what they all had, these things. It was their service club, they called them. And we sang his first one that night, and there's about 50, 60 guys. That was the whole advisory team. 50, 60 guys there. And we sang, we had no reason particularly to sing it. It would just happen to be part of the program at Kenny Pitt. We sang What a Wonderful World. And we had no idea, but that was picked up by this guy, Cronar, the Air Force disc jockey over there, the Good Morning Vietnam, that guy over there. Yeah. And that was the big song with him. And here we came in and we sang it, and boy, we were everybody's buddy from that time on. It was requested every show we did from that point on. Everybody would sing that song. And also that night, we finished our show. It was a 55-minute show. And we finished it up, with some, I'll Be Seeing You, or Softly As I Leave You, a regular finale song, type thing. And when it was all over with, instead of exiting, the thing, Nutsy, he takes a dive right off the stage, but he dives off the stage and walks right into these guys, right down there with them, and starts palavering with them down there, and everything. And of course, the rest of us get down there. Now we're on a schedule. We're supposed to leave right away, and we get down there, and next thing you do, we sing a song, and then we sing another song, and the next thing you know, we sang for the next 2 hours. Then standing in the middle of these guys, and they didn't want us to leave. They said, "Look, you don't want to leave. It's near midnight. You travel at night. You can't, you just don't do that." We had about 12 miles to go to get back to inside the Air Force base, and that was found with us. They were on the reverse slope of a hill, and they were almost immune to any rocket fire, the way they were situated. So stay with us. We can, and they wouldn't let us stay. They called our escort officer called up and said, they want us to stay. No, you can't. You got to come on back. Well, and I'm only this one time. I think it kind of was typical of these guys. When they found out that we had to go back, and there wasn't anything that they could do about it, they were going to send us back, and we were in a 6x6 truck. And we took off. They had a Jeep with 4 guys in it, a mounted .50 caliber machine gun that went up ahead of us, and then 2 Jeeps behind us, similarly, with big heavy machine guns mounted in the Jeep, and 4 guys in each one of them. And they escorted us back with 12 guys all the way back to Da Nang, and then of course they had to come back themselves too. But that's what they did. Since we had to do that. And of course that was also the big night, where Buckner, where we got challenged at the gate going back at the checkpoint, going back into the Air Force base. And there's a big Vietnamese boy, and he wasn't going to be moved. We always used to kid Buckner about, he kept poking him with that M16, poking Buckner, And Buckner didn't, he said, I really wasn't scared because I had my Banlon shirt on, and he said, and it was getting pretty hairy. And the 3 of them were in the back of the truck, and I was sitting in the front seat with the driver and the escort officer. And while I was just starting to go on back to the thing, all of a sudden I don't know where he got it or where he had it from. The next thing I know, the driver's got an M16 in his hand, And our escort officer has got that 38 that he pulls out of his holster. He's sitting there with it thing. And I say, man, the first night we're here, you know, we're going to get in a firefight. And so it was getting pretty hairy. And when an American non-com showed up from out there, and he got everything kind of straightened out and everything. But this clown wasn't going to let us back in there, no matter what we had. We had papers and everything. He wouldn't let us in there. And so it's the way it was, you know, the whole time we were there. And so we were at Da Nang. We did one hospital in Da Nang. Most of the time we didn't do hospitals. We did. Well, I'll tell you about that in a minute. But we did this one hospital thing in Da Nang, and we had 9 people in the audience. And they were one of the best audiences you ever want to see.
I bet.
9 people. And then we got a chance, had a little break up there. They took us on a boat ride and everything, and we got to see what they called Monkey Mountain. The big mountain up there where they had all this electronic equipment where they vectored in all the B-52 flights and everything coming from Air Force out of Okinawa and everything like that. They vectored them into all this radio equipment right on top of that mountain up there. And they said, you can take pictures of anything you want, just don't aim anything in at that interior. You can look in there if you want to, but don't take any pictures. And so this was all happening the very first time we were there. And so anyway, we got that over with up there, and it was just one big tear-jerking thing after another up there. You know, with these were the guys really in the line, and a good many of the advisory teams that we were supposed to entertain weren't necessarily all combat people. See, they'd have a provincial chief, like would be a county executive or a county judge or something, and then there would be an American counterpart to him. There'd be a chief of police and an American counterpart, an agricultural thing, and there was an American counterpart for everything to operate, you know, the gun. And they call it the pacification program, and that's the way we're supposed to get them, you know, over to our side, or get them to operate, you know, a bit more efficiently. And those are the kind of guys, we saw a lot of that. Not all of them were basic combat troops, except that these guys were out in the mess all the time. They had to be. And then from there, they flew us back halfway back down the coast to a place called Phuket. And it so happened that we had our biggest crowd there. It was about 400 people. And we found out later on, anyway, that it was for an Air Force group there. And we hadn't really been planned to go there, but they got us there because it so happened that the commanding officer, I think, was either a barbershopper or an aficionado, because he not only had us there and everything, it was the order. Entertainment coming tonight, you go. No matter whether you want to go or not, you had to go. And that was about 400 people, and it was we got to see a South Korean fire base, which was had 155 field artillery, and it was in a big circular. They fired 360 degrees, and it was the damnedest way to fight a war you ever saw in your life. But anyway, and from there back on to Tonsanut, and we were there. We were based at Tonsanut for the rest of the 3 weeks that we were there. And we were, every day they would send us out to a team someplace. We'd jump into a helicopter and go out and do a show, and usually be finished and back in by, before dinner. And sometimes we did 2 shows, but most of the time it was just out and go. We'd go anywhere. Sometimes would take us out maybe 200 to 300 miles, and we'd do a show and then back. Everything was under really tight security, boy, I mean big time. And the last I think one incident to give you a little bit idea of how things were, we were due to do this one show, and I can't tell you where it was, but we we fly in, and the helicopter comes down and drops down onto the pad, and we didn't see anybody. There wasn't anybody around. And we had an escort officer with us all the time. We couldn't go anywhere without him. He went about 50 yards to a building. He said, "Oh, I'm going to get on the phone here and find out something." Anyway, a few minutes later, here he comes out of that building on a dead run, said, winding up, you know, he was a helicopter pilot himself, had his pistol in his hand, and we comes around and he jumps on the helicopter when it was really airborne already. He jumps on, and what had happened was our pilot landed where he was supposed to land, where he was told to land. It so happened that during the time he was briefed, and the time that we got there was that it had already been moved to where we landed right in the middle of Viet Cong territory. And the place we were supposed to land was about a half a mile away. And it just so happened, I guess they looked and see 4 guys walking around in sports shirts. They probably didn't seem to be much of a threat. So nothing happened really. But that's the kind of thing that went on, Troy. It was just another time we were out there. We did a place that they dropped us off, and we did a show, and they brought us back to this pad that was this iron mesh that they laid down, you know, for runways and stuff. And it was about 1 acre of this stuff. And they said, "Now don't get off of the iron mesh because there's mines out here, and we don't know where they are. They laid some, we laid some, they're all, but they don't know where they are. So don't get off of the mesh." And they said, "Well, is the helicopter going to wait?" "No, he'll come back for you." Well, we get back out there, no helicopter. And we got rained on and dried out, and rained on and dried out, and got rained on wet again when our helicopter finally showed up about 2 hours after it was supposed to. One helicopter lands at the extreme other end of the mesh, and it painted black with no markings